discovered by science. We're talking about the plasmid. You can think of these microscopic wonders as the vehicles of biotechnology, silently carrying the code of life itself.
So, let's begin our journey with part 1. What are plasmids?
A plasmid is an essential tool in biotechnology, acting as a vehicle to carry genetic material into host cells. In easy words, these are small circular rings of DNA. They are the literal foundation of genetic engineering. Without these tiny vehicles, our ability to transport new instructions into a living cell would be almost impossible. They are nature's delivery system, patiently waiting to be guided by researchers. Moving on to part 2, let's examine the anatomy of a plasmid. To truly understand how a vehicle works, we have to look under the hood. When we look at a full map of a classic small circular DNA molecule known to scientists as PUC19, we see an elegant and carefully engineered design. Notice the 4 key regions here, each completely essential for its function as a cloning vector. We have the origin of replication, the selectable marker, the multiple cloning site, and the LAC-Z prime gene. Over the next few moments, we'll gently break down exactly what each of these components does. First, observe the origin of replication, which is usually just called the ORI. This is perhaps the most critical component of all. It's the exact sequence of DNA where replication initiates. Because of this ORI, the plasmid is allowed to reproduce itself entirely independently of the host bacterium's main chromosomal DNA. Now, PUC19 has what scientists call a high copy number. This means a single tiny bacterium can contain hundreds of copies of this exact same plasmid. And since bacteria can double every 20 minutes, millions of copies are quietly manufactured in just a matter of hours. Next, let's look at the selectable marker, named AmpR. This acts as a biological shield. It's a gene that encodes for an enzyme offering resistance to the antibiotic ampicillin. When researchers grow bacteria on a plate covered in ampicillin, only the cells that have successfully taken up our plasmid are going to survive. The antibiotic destroys all the rest. So the crucial point here is that this shield lets researchers see exactly which cells actually possess the plasmid, because only those protected cells will form living colonies. The final 2 pieces of our anatomy are intimately connected. The multiple cloning site, or MCS, is a short, engineered region that contains several unique restriction cut sites. Think of them as precise molecular scissors, where researchers can insert foreign DNA. But notice carefully where it is. This MCS is located strategically inside the LAC-Z prime gene. The LAC-Z prime gene normally helps create an enzyme that breaks down sugar. By placing the insertion site directly inside it, scientists created a truly brilliant way to track their work, which we'll explore very soon. This brings us to part 3, the different types of plasmid vectors. While a standard vehicle like PUC19 is wonderful for everyday tasks, sometimes researchers need to carry much heavier molecular cargo. Capacities scale beautifully depending on the vehicle you choose. If a DNA insert is too large, a standard plasmid becomes unstable, and the information is lost. So, specialized vehicles were built. Standard plasmids like PUC19 hold up to 10 kilobases. Shuttle vectors, which can actually move between 2 different organisms like bacteria and yeast, carry up to 20. Cosmids combine plasmid features with a virus to carry up to 45. And then we reach the giants. BACs and YACs, which are capable of holding massive portions of genomes. Let's look a bit more closely at these 2 extremes because they brilliantly illustrate the diversity of our biotechnology tools. BACs, or bacterial artificial chromosomes, are based on a natural fertility plasmid. They maintain very strict control, keeping only 1 or 2 copies per cell. This makes them highly stable and perfect for large inserts without accidental deletions. On the other hand, YACs, or yeast artificial chromosomes, are linear. They aren't circular at all. They are massive eukaryotic structures carrying up to 3,000 kilobases. They offer the largest capacity available to science right now. Now for part 4, the fascinating process of blue-white screening. We now arrive at a deeply fascinating question. How do researchers visually verify if their genetic engineering actually worked? Well, they rely on a beautiful biochemical trick based on a principle called alpha complementation. Let me explain this in easy words. Imagine a vital enzyme called beta-galactosidase, which breaks down lactose. Now, imagine it broken into two non-functional halves. The plasmid carries the instructions for one half, called the alpha peptide. The host bacterial cell carries the instructions for the other half, the omega fragment. Separately, they do absolutely nothing, but together, they complement each other perfectly to form a functional working enzyme. Let's trace this pure logic, step by step. Step 1. An empty PUC19 vector, meaning it hasn't been altered with any new foreign DNA yet, peacefully enters the host cell. Step 2. The plasmid produces its alpha peptide, which finds and complements the host's fragment. Step 3. They beautifully assemble into a fully functional beta-galactosidase enzyme. The cell now possesses a brand new ability it did not have before. But how do we actually see this invisible chemistry? We visualize the function by adding two things to the agar plate where the bacteria grow. We add IPTG, which is an inducer to switch on the production process. And most importantly, we add xgal, which is a colorless, modified sugar. When our newly formed, fully functional enzyme encounters this xgal, it cleaves it. The poetic result of this chemical reaction is the creation of an insoluble, bright blue product. The bacterial colony itself turns a deep, vivid blue. Which brings us to our final chapter, Part 5, Finding the Successful Clones. So we know what happens when an empty plasmid is present, but what happens when our foreign DNA is successfully inserted? This brings us to a methodical concept known as insertional inactivation. Remember that multiple cloning site located inside the laxi' gene? Step 1. Researchers successfully clone their desired foreign DNA directly into that site. Step 2. Because new material has been literally shoved into the middle of the gene, the laxi' reading frame is completely disrupted. It's broken. Step 3. As a result, the plasmid fails to produce the alpha peptide. And step 4. Without both halves, the functional beta-galactosidase enzyme simply cannot be made. Let's clearly contrast our two possible outcomes on the agar plate. The blue colonies contain the empty vector. Alpha complementation succeeded, the enzyme cleaved the xgal, and they turned blue. But they contain no foreign DNA. They are not what the researchers looking for. The white colonies, however, contain the recombinant vector. Because our foreign DNA disrupted the gene, complementation fails. The xgal remains completely untouched and colorless. The colonies just remain their natural, creamy white color. It's these beautiful, plain white colonies that researchers carefully pick, knowing they hold these successfully inserted DNA. We've journeyed through the microscopic anatomy and the brilliant chemistry of genetic cloning today, and I want to leave you with this final thought. If these tiny engineered vehicles can so precisely carry and reveal new DNA, how might we use them tomorrow to cure diseases and write the future of biology?